Welcome to Napa. Here we are at the beautiful Rudd Estates in Oakville, which is one of the regions here in the Napa Valley. It's about 17 different AVAs here, little sub-AVAs within the Napa Valley AVA. But we're here at beautiful Rudd Estate, and today we're going to be talking with some of the winemakers and the staff here about wine in Napa. So we're really excited to bring you this and jump into your living rooms and bring a little bit of Napa to you. What we're going to be talking about today, besides the wine, is the Vintec itself. And really want to feature the 5 pillars that we've talked about a number of times. And we're going to be talking about that with one of our master sommeliers coming up. The wines that we're going to be trying today are Sauvignon Blanc and a Cabernet Sauvignon. So before we get started, let's go ahead and pour the wine now. Unlike a lot of other wine shows, go ahead and pour yourself an ounce or two, just something like this. And I wanted to explain a little bit of a process to you guys, because wine tasting is what we're doing here. We want to kind of get our heads wrapped around it. So I've got a little system called the 5 S's. So it's the first S is see, swirl, sniff, sip, and savor. So we're going to all be doing that. That's why you pour just a little bit. As we go through this, you can pour a little more. At the end of the show, we're all going to pour whatever and have our glasses full. But just wanted to go through that with you. The reason that we sniff and swirl is to put more oxygen in the wine and therefore allow the aromatics to come up. The aromatics are what sort of signal our brain to start noticing some flavors and different sort of flavors that we can identify later with our taste buds. So that's really part of learning about wine. I always encourage people to try wine, even if you say or you think you may not like it. Chances are, if you keep an open mind about this and don't judge it on its first sip. But that's the other thing too, is go ahead and take some in your mouth and just hold it there for a second, swirl it around a little bit. And let it just sink in. Notice what you taste. Like this one's got a nice acidity in the background, sort of lemony, citrusy flavors going on. And we're going to explore a little bit more of this with Oscar, and we're going to jump into the cabs too. But just to give you a brief little story about what's going on here, we are in this Oakville region where we're standing right now is on what's called a bench, the Oakville bench. Behind me you see a vineyard that is just about to start planting rootstock. It's been fallow for a couple of years. We'll go into that with our winemaker Natalie. But we're just in a gorgeous area of Napa. So when you guys are ready to come out here, we encourage you to do so. And they're actually open for business right now. Whether you're wearing a mask or not, everybody's open for outdoor dining and outdoor wine tasting. So look at this weather. It's about 4 o'clock out here on Thursday or Monday afternoon. So this is all coming to you live right now from Napa. So I just wanted to make sure that you guys are interested in giving us some questions. Any questions that you guys have, be sure to add those up into the chat. And anyway, we look forward to getting started with you. But you know what? Everything starts with these grapes out in the vineyard. So let's go out into the vineyard and check it out. Napa Valley. It sits at the pinnacle of the wine regions of the New World and of California. And no matter what you've heard or read about, until you're here and experience the place firsthand, it's hard to imagine a place more representative of lifestyle, creative expression, individuality, and diversity than this unique and beautiful part of California. North to south, vineyards sprawl across the valley floor, only to climb up either side of the nearby hills and mountains. The Vacas to the east and the Mayacamas to the west. And from the southern end of the valley, where the San Francisco Bay helps create the perfect conditions for wine grapes, the geography, climate, and soil types work as one to create a terroir and a culture of winemakers that place Napa Valley in the epicenter of the new world of wine. So Natalie, here we are out in this beautiful block. We're right at the corner of Silverado and
Oakville Crossroads.
Oakville Crossroads, which actually lends its name to the label, right? The
Exactly.
Crossroads. So this vineyard is an old established vineyard. I can tell by the size of this. What would you say these vines are?
These vines are just over 20 years old, and so really they're at the point in their life where they're really coming into their own. They're really expressing themselves. A lot of times young vines give you a little extra, and these, it's just more about elegance and finesse and, you know, more I guess say more terroir.
And character, yeah, sense of
character.
place. Well, as we walk through here, I noticed it's trellised in a certain way, which is really important. We can't go into all that now, but we just finished caning or pruning.
And pruning, yeah.
And the next phase coming up shortly is going to be bud break.
I know.
That's when things get exciting in Napa Valley.
It is. I think this is probably the most exciting time of the year because you start to feel like we're off to the races at that point. And so
Exactly.
everything has been pruned, tied down, as you can see, and we'll just be checking on a regular basis to see if you start seeing that little popcorn, little woolly starting of a leaf coming out.
So we have bud break, then we have the next phase, which is the little berries that pop out.
Yep, we'll start seeing the canopy kind of starting to form, then we'll start seeing the fruit set. I mean, it's on.
It's going to be exciting. So this is really the best time of the year to be here, and so we're super happy to be able to bring it to your living room, because we're bringing Napa to you with Natalie, and we're going to continue to taste some more of the Crossroads label wine. You guys are relatively new at this, and we're just trying to help spread the word a little bit on the Crossroads, yeah?
Yes, we appreciate it. The more the better.
Nice. All right, guys, moving on to the next segment. Cheers. And here we are, everybody. We're in the library room of Rudd Cellars, and this is Oscar Henket. He's the managing director here. And we're going to spend a little bit of time with Oscar going over the history of Rudd and sort of give us a sort of an overview of the area. And as we go through our guests, you're going to see these different little packages that we've created to enable you to sort of get a feel for the place and sort of push the story forward a little bit. But Oscar, thanks so much for having us again today. Really appreciate it.
Good to have you back, Mike.
It's a beautiful, beautiful outside. I know the vineyard is just starting to really pop with spring.
It's an exciting time of the year for us. Springtime is a new beginning, new growth in the vineyard, meaning we can work on our vintage starting right now.
And something else that's new, and we spoke about this a little bit before, was that this field out here, when we met a couple of years ago, you were showing me this field that's gone, you've let it go fallow. In fact, you've encouraged it with different types of things, as you said, radishes and different types of sorghum and stuff to sort of biodynamically enrich the soil. And now, what is it, 3 years or so?
It's been fallow for 3 years, correct. We took it out, the old vineyard we took out in 2018, the spring of 2018, and now we've grown sunflowers, daikon radishes, sorghum grass, all different kinds of cover crop to rejuvenate the soil, give it nutrients, take our time. This is the only time we have, hopefully in a 100-year time span, to rejuvenate that soil. So,
I found it really interesting when you were talking about how each of those plants does a specific thing to the soil. Like the daikon radishes go deep and they're very strong. They're almost like woody, and they break the soil
break
apart.
it up. Except, instead of running a big heavy tractor through the field,
which compresses
the soil and works against your root system and the ability to extract. Why not have nature take care of it itself and grow a daikon radish?
I agree. Well, let's not keep everybody waiting. Let's pour a little bit of this Sauvignon Blanc and then talk about it. So while you're pouring, Mount Veeder is an area over here on the western side of the valley. If you're looking at Napa Valley, north to south, you've got the Vaca Mountains to the east and the Mayacamas to the west. And the Mayacamas are what separate Napa Valley from Sonoma and then the coast. So the coastal fog will come in the summertime and sort of nudge up against there, and Mount Veeder sort of sticks out on top sometimes. So tell us a little bit about the qualities of Mount Veeder and what it does to offer a unique feature to this wine.
Mount Veeder is a unique mountainside in the valley. It's on the west side of the valley, so we've got some of the influence from the Pacific coast for sure. But it's an unusual spot to grow Sauvignon Blanc, or white wine varietals in general. And Samantha's father, Mr. Rudd, was very audacious to really grow grapes there starting in the 90s. And everybody told him, you should be growing Cabernet Sauvignon there. And he said, well, if we want to craft a world-class white wine, we need to grow it in the spot where it belongs, which is right there above the inversion layer. So cooler days, warmer nights, a perfect spot to grow Sauvignon Blanc, but also a little bit of Semillon Sauvignon Gris. So all three varietals are in this wine.
Mm-hmm. And I love the way this comes off. Now, a lot of folks, we're going to talk further when we get to Vincent, the Master Somm at Press, about food pairing specifically. But right off the bat, I'm getting a lot of citrus notes on this. How would you describe this? A lot of Sauvignon Blancs are described as grassy or green.
Yeah, I would not say that with this Sauvignon Blanc. I would say a little bit more the citrus notes, the grapefruit route, if you will, but also a little bit of stone fruit on the nose. I even get sometimes a little bit
Like
of fresh
peach?
fennel. I just did a beautiful hike with my family up by Lake Hennessy last week, and all the young fennel was coming up, and it reminded me actually of this wine.
It does have an herbaceous quality to it. So I hope you guys are all enjoying that out there. Feel free to throw some comments up to us if you wish. And but I'd like to maybe while we're sipping on this, Oscar, cover a little bit of the where we are, a sense of place. I know Samantha's now at the helm. She's sort of in this. The concept is multi-generational, and that's what wineries, and especially this winery, is sort of carrying the flag on that concept. So tell us a little bit how she's doing and how that came to be.
She's doing very well, and we're very lucky and happy to have her, obviously, as the next generation to carry through the foundation that her father laid out for us. It takes, I would say, a good 20, maybe 2 decades, 20 years to lay a foundation for an estate like this. The word estate for us is an important word. It really stands for what we are, and for us it means that we are 100% family owned.
Mm-hmm.
We have our own winemaker, Natalie, who you'll meet in a moment. And also we make our own wine. We grow our own wine in the field, so we have our own vineyard crews. Everything that happens in between these beautiful rock walls you just saw outside is controlled and done by us. And that way we can control the actual quality of the wine, but also the way we grow it initially. I think those are the first steps that we see in the vineyard right now, pruning and planting a new vineyard. Those will determine down the road how the quality of the wine is going to come out. So
it's kind of a perfect, winemaking is so metaphorical to so many other parts of life. Like you've got this balance of nature, you're trying to take care of the land, and then it's giving you something in return. And then the winemaker gets to use this product as their craft, and they sort of get, and it depends on each block is going to be different. Each vineyard is different. Each wine grower is different. So that's one of the beauties of wine is, and I encourage people to try as many wines in your lifetime as you can. Don't get stuck in a rut and just say, oh, I want my, whatever your favorite wine is, fill in the blank. So with regards to the process that you guys use out here as well, this soil is so unique in that there's, if we could see out here, there's a big mountain range behind us, and some long time ago, a giant avalanche brought all this soil and rocks and boulders right here where we are right now. About 300 yards this way to our north, a completely different type of soil, but both of these are owned by you guys on this, what, 47 or so acres?
55 acres altogether, 47 acres planted, yes.
And as a result, the two same exact Cabernet Sauvignons grow there, but yet yield a different results.
Correct. Characteristically very different, both sides of the property, and that's the uniqueness about Rudd Estate in general. And we're talking about the red wine varietals now, but the two distinct parts of the property are really something that we can work with well in our blends because we can play them off of each other. We can get some of the core structure from that volcanic landslide you just described as the backbone of the wine, the structure of the wine, and then some of the finesse and the delicacy and the beautiful aspects come from the more northern part of the property.
And you know, that leads me to this. Everybody, this has been, let's just say, challenging times. And now things seem to be opening up. It's spring. The sun is shining. Hopefully it's shining where you guys are at too. And people are getting a little restless, and we're starting to get more sort of a good feeling about maybe getting out.
True.
How would you encourage people to come out and sort of experience Napa if they've got some, question marks about, can we come? Is it safe? What do we do? Where do we stay? Is it open?
I would say if you've been vaccinated and if you socially distance and if you follow all protocol, I think it's a very safe place to be. We're all outdoors all the time anyway, even before COVID. We even knew what COVID was. We live outside, we entertain outside, we share our wines outside. So all of that can happen. It's beautiful. It's 70 degrees outside and it's sunny.
Well, that's awesome. So Ben was asking about the Crossroads label. So the Crossroads label itself is pretty cool because it's sort of an aerial shot of where we are right now. We're actually on the Silverado Trail at the corner of Oakville Crossroad. And in Napa, if you look at the map, there's the Silverado Trail on the eastern side, and on the western side is Highway 29. Highway 29. And in order for people to get across, they've got all these so-called crossroads, and we're at one. Tell us a little bit about the philosophy and the sort of the movement to get this line going.
We're super excited to share this with you because we started this label about 2 years ago. And like I said earlier, it takes about 2 decades to lay a foundation for an estate. That's after 20 years, we know how the vines are working, what kind of fruit they're giving us, and what we can work with. So After Samantha's father passed away, we thought, okay, we have a foundation that's 20 years old. The vineyard is performing exceptionally well. This is the right time to add a new label to the mix and call it Crossroads, because we were at a crossroads in our company, going from one generation to the next.
Right.
We were on Oakville Crossroad.
Right.
The world happens to be on a crossroad right now.
It's pretty good timing.
We found the timing was correct, and we fully embraced the name Rudd on the label and exactly showing people where the vineyard is and what the surrounding area is. So we're very excited to have this label.
Well, I'm excited too, and this is they have two wines, the Cabernet Sauvignon and the Sauvignon Blanc.
Correct.
And it's interesting, a lot of people's perception that maybe they haven't been to Napa or they've been in the grocery store or the wine store and they see a label that has just a multitude of varietals, let's say. You guys keep it pretty simple, and I suppose that's part of your philosophy as well. Just, you know, let's do what we know how to do best, really best.
Less is more.
Yeah, there you
right?
go.
That's what it is.
There you go. So what's next this year? What do you guys have moving forward? I know you've got some interactivities with your customer base that are coming out here and helping you plant, and wants to know, or rather, they come out here and help you do this process that you're now doing, which is the rootstock. Tell us a little bit about that. There's a bunch of holes out here, and it's we're going to come over here one of these days on Monday or Tuesday and plant some.
We have a lot of work going on this year, and it's an important time because, like I said, the land has been fallow for 3 years, and now we're excited to finally plant the rootstock. It's a long process as well because it's not just one plant that we're planting. We're planting the rootstock first, let that take for a year, and then we graft the grape varietal on top of it. So if you come back next year this time, we'll be grafting Cabernet Sauvignon on top of the rootstock that hopefully took very well. So it's, again, a long-term process. Then it takes another 4 years before we get our first fruit. And then it will take another couple of years after that before the fruit makes the cut for these wines. So
I was telling Natalie when we were visiting the cellar or the cave a while back that I want to get out there and plant some rootstocks so that maybe 10 years from now, we might be able to be past the barreling stage and we'll be in the blending stage, and we can at least have some
your hands in
early
it, right?
release 10 years from now. Well, listen, I hope all you guys are enjoying the Sauvignon Blanc out there. We're going to keep moving on now. And you know, wine, we just visited the vineyard, so now we know where the grapes come from. But let's go out and check out the caves, which are just on the same property. Just a beautiful cave system and a workshop where we're going to go out there and talk to the winemaker. Let's go out to the caves right now. Hey everybody, Mike Rayford here. Today we're at Rudd Cellar and I'm with winemaker Natalie Bath, and we are in the vat room. What do you call this place?
We actually refer to this as our workshop because we do feel that we're more of craftsmen in our process here, and so rather than calling it a tank room or something, you know, a little less tied to the vineyard, that just seems to be a little bit more encompassing of our goal. We really believe that the priority is out in the vineyard, and all we're doing in here is really making sure that it has a smooth transition from grape into the tank room and then down into its élevage stage in the barrel. So in here, we really look at it as an extension of what we can do from the vineyard. And so having multiple tools to play with, such as these size tanks, and the shape of them is actually really important, and actually really thought that these would be crucial from a maceration standpoint and also from a cap size management style.
That's the part that's intriguing to me, because for anyone who's ever seen fermentation, after it goes through the destemmer and it goes into a fermenting vat, after a couple of days when it starts fermenting, you have this nice cap on there. And there's a bunch of different methodologies, whether it's hand punching, gentle punching, or if it's stirring. but this allows for either a thicker cap or a thinner cap, depending, I suppose, on the grapes themselves, or the thickness of the skin, or the density of the skin. Is that sort of how you guys pick which barrel or which tank it goes in?
Exactly.
So Natalie, we were talking about the different tanks and the different vineyards. Let's go back to that for a second, because when we opened up the show, we were talking about a sense of place, the soil types, and the difference that it really makes on the finished product. So the alluvial fan, which is on the northern side, is more of a sort of a finer, as you say, leftover from ancient seabeds, whereas where we're at now on what's known as the bench, a lot of people refer in Napa to this as a bench, and there's a few vineyards that are well known that put that in their profile. For those that don't know, it's basically the mountains that are over here. The Vaca is part of the Stag's Leap region that I guess had a giant avalanche a million years ago or so, and literally brought all this huge tumbling gnarly rock down here, which is sort of where the southern vineyard really is. And so therefore it gives it, even though it's the same grape varietal, the same clonal number or whatever, it gives it two completely different characteristics.
Exactly, which from a winemaking perspective is a dream.
So we've gone from the vineyard to destemming into the tank room, or the workshop as you like to call it. I think it's time to go down to the barrel room and see where all of these things age and sort of the next step.
Let's do it.
So Natalie, we're down here in the cave, and this is just one of my favorite parts of wineries. I mean, there really isn't a part I don't like, but this is where we're starting to really see what happens after the pick, after the fermentation. And where we are now, we're looking at these amphora. We've got amphora, we've got eggs, and we've got Sauvignon Blanc. So let's talk about that. You guys have a very specific regimen that you run your Sauv through. And let's start with the amphora.
Of course. So the amphoras we introduced to the RUD program going back about 2015. And it's very similar in the sense of what the egg is for, in that we're looking for something that's maybe a little more neutral.
So this goes back to ancient times. I mean, thousands of years ago, this is the way wine was originally made, before they even knew about how to make an oak barrel. And now we move to this. So this is a fairly modern and recent sort of new contribution to the winemaking world. Tell us about the evolution of the egg.
Yes, and the concept behind an egg is that instead of a square tank or something upstairs where you're not getting kind of like an even circular motion through it, an egg is actually fully suited to have a more, I guess, organic and fluid fermentation process occur. And so when we actually put the juice into the egg and then we let it naturally come to temperature to actually start the fermentation, those little bubbles that come up start this really beautiful cycle that kind of constantly flows through about a month fermentation cycle in there.
Yeah, that's fascinating to me. Well, we've seen the whites, we're in the cave. Well, let's wander down and check out these barrels back here. They're so fascinating. We'll head on into the reds. This is one of my other favorite parts, because Napa Valley is really known for Cabernets, and especially big Napa Valley cabs. So we've talked a little bit about the two different vineyards that are going to make a bit of a distinction between the cabs that we're going to do, but what's your regimen when it comes to barreling those two vineyards? Clearly they're all made individually and they're separated, and then ultimately do you blend them together?
We do, actually. So the goal is that keep everything as separate as possible until we come down to blending. And the idea is that everything we make on this property always has the potential to meet the highest tier wine. And so for us, it's all going to come down to, after about 3 months of the wine living in its new home in the barrel, we'll actually start tasting through everything. And it's either barrel by barrel, lot by lot, and we're really starting to, in its own way, determine where it fits best.
So Natalie, we were talking just on our way here to this amazing barrel track that we're in right now about how fun it sounds to try wine every couple of weeks. You guys get together and you barrel taste. It's not as easy, or it's fun and it's enjoyable, but it's just not as easy as it sounds, because each one of these barrels you actually taste separately, make notes on it, and you do that as a panel or a group, and ultimately that's what determines how you come about with your blends.
Group consensus usually happens, but you know, everyone always has their favorite.
There's a couple of skirmishes usually, but isn't that what you just described, the true definition of balance? And that's the ultimate in a wine, is the acidity the alcohol content, the structure, the fruit, etc.
Exactly, and we're just looking to make the best possible wine we can from this site.
I'm excited to try the Crossroads. It's going to be so exciting, that Cabernet Sauvignon. Well, how about that? That was a pretty exclusive behind-the-scenes tour of the caves and the workshop here at Rudd. We were just talking with winemaker Natalie Bath, and she was mentioning to me that this is a pretty rare experience. So you guys may never get to see it in person, but at least you got to see it behind the scenes, and it's quite an extensive wine cave. I'd like to introduce right now Natalie Bath. Natalie, thank you so much for joining us today. She's the winemaker here at Rudd, and she's responsible for not only Rudd, but the Rudd Crossroads by Rudd. And we're going to be trying the Cabernet Sauvignon right now. So if you haven't already, pour yourself some. Let's go ahead and pour some, Natalie. So as we recommended, everybody, just pour a little bit so that gives you plenty of room in your glass to swirl and sniff and savor and all that good stuff. And we're going to get right into it and try this. Now, you'll notice the Vintec behind us, by the way. This is a Vintec live event, by the way, the Vintec experience, we're calling it. And the Vintec behind us is set, it's a multi-zone, so it's set for the proper serving temperatures on the top, and we have our cellaring temperatures on the bottom. We're going to get into that a little bit more with Master Sommelier Vincent Morrow when he joins us coming up next. But now, Natalie, I'd like you to sort of share with us some of your thoughts on how folks should sort of approach this particular wine. A lot of folks are, maybe they're not the most experienced and this is something new to them. How would you let somebody ease into the experience of smelling and tasting this beautiful Cabernet?
No, I think that's a great question, and I think typically we all think of Napa Valley Cabernets as something that you need to put away for years and years and hide it from yourself because you're waiting for this epiphany moment. And truthfully, the Crossroads Cabernet Sauvignon was made so that you can enjoy it now. This is especially true for the 2017 vintage. I think this is something that you open, you can let it breathe for a little bit. Doesn't have to be for hours. It will develop a little bit more in a decanter, but really to be enjoyed with friends and family over a great meal.
So let's smell this first. It's our first steps after swirling. What are we catching here as far as, and by the way, you guys don't have to, this is not a test. If you smell watermelon or whatever, I mean, you can smell whatever you want to smell, but there's a sort of a guideline for this we'll get into. But what do you smell and what do you expect to smell when you smell a good cab?
For me in particular, especially with this wine, you're always going to get a level of a fruit component. For me, it's always going to be black cherries, blackberry, but always reminiscent with our wines is this beautiful rosemary character, and it kind of can fall into this herbal note. Also, I think licorice can kind of be there a little bit of that anise, and then for me, even there's almost an irony mineral component, which I think just kind of gives you a broad spectrum of what Cabernet can be. It doesn't have to just be fruit, and it doesn't just have to be cocoa, chocolate, wood. There's a really lovely, spice rack in there for you to play with.
And notice all those words that she was describing, all those smells and aromas. Those are what really kind of connect to your brain, like we talked about in the Sauvignon Blanc section. And that sort of informs your taste buds, because your taste buds are sort of limited in a way, and they rely on your smell to sort of make the connection. So let's go ahead and sip it now and really let's see what we got. Well, it's a Napa Cab. Beautiful, nicely done.
Thank you very much.
So, speaking of Napa Cabs, a lot of times people have a mindset or a perception that, big, bold Napa Cab, it's sort of a headline almost. This doesn't come off like that. This has really soft tannins. It's got a really long arc of a finish, and all those flavors sort of subtly go away very slowly. What are some of the things that make yours, I mean, besides the terroir, I mean, how do you approach winemaking so that you don't get that super extracted, super black, high alcohol cap?
You know, I think you started with the right thing, which is our property. It is our terroir. It's our land. And so we're really, when it comes to harvest time and we're bringing the wine or the grapes up to the workshop itself, it's at its best then. And we're just trying to kind of almost babysit it through the fermentation process without being too impactful with our hands. As much as, you know, we're winemakers, we really want to be the ones that just really kind of craft it along its way. We have the unique tanks that we saw earlier, you know, between the concrete, between the stainless steel, 2 different styles, so we can make sure we're not overly extracting certain plots of the property. We have barrel fermentation, which is a great opportunity to incorporate a little bit more structure as well. But really, it's the fruit speaking for itself. And we're lucky here in Oakville, as you talked about with Oscar, to have different soil profiles to play with too.
And that was what was fun about the tour of the workshop, is those unique stainless steel tanks, and then the beautiful caves and all the different wines down there. How many vintages are currently in barrel before they've, you know, I know you're starting to taste pretty soon and then bottle. How many vintages do you have down there currently?
So typically 2.
Okay.
For us right now, for example, we're just finalizing the blends on the 2019, so they will get bottled in July. And then just coming up in the next couple months will be a year for the 2020. So we're very grateful and lucky to have a space that can not only be the right temperature and environment for it, but that we can hold 2 vintages as well.
That's pretty cool. And, you know, a lot of folks too are, one of the reasons that we're featuring this wine cellar behind us too, is when you do buy wine and you love the wine, you end up wanting to get a couple of cases, or at least a case. But well, I have a theory about that too. I always recommend 2 cases, and I'll tell you why in a minute. But the idea that you can drink it now and then hold it as well, this is the perfect unit for that, because it really replicates what's going on in your cellar. It's always a constant temperature, 56 degrees or so.
Correct.
It's very dark in there. It's very not jostling around and things like that. So those are all really key elements on being able to preserve and hold a wine. What are some of the things, and I'll talk more about Vincent with this, but what is the arc of that you can expect? The young wine obviously tastes really good. You bottle it, and how long before you actually release it once it's bottled? So it's in the barrel for 2 years, then it goes into bottle. How long do you keep it in bottle before you release it?
So about 22 months in oak, and then we'll move it up to tank, and then it'll go through the bottling process, and then it's about 2 years typically. This wine in particular is just about a year, and the idea is that it's blended to be a little bit more approachable at a younger age. And so for us, though, I think anytime a wine is released, you know, it kind of takes a little bit of time to build this arc you're talking about. And really in the first 1 to 2 years, you really see it starting to build and grow into itself. Wine's an ever-evolving creature, right?
Absolutely.
And so I think truly at the 3 to 5 years for this wine, you're really just seeing it become itself. But I think there's no harm in enjoying it in that first, where the fruit is really bright and the acidity is really lovely and beautiful. That's when I personally enjoy this wine.
So the quick version of the 2 case theory for me is, you buy 2 cases, you put one down and it's sort of in the forever zone. You put it on that bottom shelf. The next one is you have maybe a bottle every 6 months, and you kind of make a few notes, and as you go through that, you're looking at maybe a year's worth of wine, and over that course of that year, or maybe you do it once a year. That's what I was actually, that first case for me it would be once a month.
Exactly.
But 1 bottle per year. Make a note, and then as you see it start to arc, that's when it's really good. That's where the second case comes in. You can enjoy the heck out of that case and drink the heck out of it, and you still can sort of measure the other side of the curve. So one of the questions I've been getting offline and online is like, how does a young woman like you become a stellar winemaker in Napa? I mean, did you grow into this job? I mean, you grew up right down the street, I understand.
I did. I'm actually from St. Helena. I grew up not really imagining myself in this position, but when I came back from college, everything kind of happened the way it did. I worked very hard to get here. I did a lot more internships, which is typically, you know, where you go into a property for a couple months and you really fully engage yourself from their vineyard into the cellar. And it was after my 2012 vintage here that I was offered a full-time job. And then from there, I've been lucky enough to work my way up from what we would call a lowly cellar hand up to my current position. Exactly.
So, you know, when you get the gig, you think this is pretty good. So you kind of had the gig, and then suddenly you get called into the office one day. Then what happened?
Yes, I have known the Rudd family for a very long time, and so Leslie Rudd called me into his office and asked me if I had felt completely fulfilled, if I had done everything I'd wanted, and I mentioned that I had never done a vintage over in Europe, and that was one thing that I wished. And he said, is there anywhere in particular you'd like to go? And I honestly said anywhere, truthfully, and no joke, a day later he comes back and says, you're set up at Petrus, we'll see you in a couple months. And I mean, my jaw hit the floor. I mean, it was unreal to work not only at such a historical property, but, you know, just at the top of its game, you know, and historically speaking, very similar from a family-owned perspective as well.
How can we even like let people know? Petrus is sort of like, so what is it? How many generations? Like, I mean, it's what, 10, 12 generations or
exactly.
more? Mm-hmm. It's the premier cru of France. It's so well known. I mean, Google it and find out how much bottles go for it. It's pretty stunning. But you got to do an internship there.
Yes.
And that was from vineyard all the way through the whole process. That must have been exciting.
It was amazing.
And do those types of things, obviously everything that we do in our life sort of brings us further down the road and influences to some degree, whether it's the music that we listen to, the art that we enjoy. What tools did you get out of that to bring with you that you can, you know, you're there in your workshop and now you're pulling stuff it's yours, but I mean, you were influenced by something. What are some of the big influences that might have happened to you at that time?
You know, for me, I think the majority of it was the people that I was around. I think there's obviously a passion for wine itself, but I think there's also that it's just a part of your everyday life. You know, it's from lunches, a part of a meal with family, and this group of people that I was with in particular, it was very eye-opening to see them treat their vines, their home, as part of their own extension. And so I think bringing that back here and seeing that same passion with the Rudd family, that the wine, while it is extremely important, is also something should be something very normal and fun, and just not put up on this pedestal that, you know, not only certain people can enjoy, but everyone should be able to find a wine that fits into their world.
And really integrate it into what your life or your lifestyle really is.
Exactly.
Well, that's one of the things that we're really proud of doing here. Ben wants to know if there's a wine club, because it's not on the website.
No, you know, originally we actually started this wine for distribution only. This was going to be something very fun for us to bring out into the market and for more people to gain access to. But we have been asked by a lot of people to actually do a small amount through our website. And so once we have our allocation of it, we put it up there, and it's first come, first serve. And so, Ben, get on it.
Yeah, get in line. Hurry up. Yeah, that's pretty amazing, amazing stuff. Well, it's been a blast speaking with you again, and I mean, I just love the idea that you know, what all these things come together as, quote, a lifestyle. And I think Leslie Rudd was quoted as saying he was at an event one time, and all these guys were toasting around a table, and somebody said, you know, good wine, good food, good friends, good life, you know, a good time. And really that's what it all comes down to, is the folks that you know, and hopefully you guys are out there sharing with people that you care about and are enjoying yourself and have some food to go with it. And it really is part of the wine, I guess, lifestyle, if you will. You don't have to be hoity-toity about it. It's just a fun thing to do. And the more that you get together with new people. I mean, I've just got to meet all you guys up here, and it feels kind of like an extended family in a way. So thank you for having us.
We're happy to have you.
Well, cheers on that.
Yes.
And you know what we're going to do, speaking of food, let's run over to Press right now and meet the chef, Tessier, and talk a little bit to Vincent over there and just see what you guys can look forward to when you come to Napa next time. Let's run over to Press.
You know, kind of the first thing we start with is, you know, what is coming from the farm, what's coming in, you know, seasonally, mushroom-wise, etc. So that's kind of really the starting point. And then, you know, we want to have a certain amount of, you know, raw fish dishes and vegetable-focused dishes. I think it's probably the biggest, you know, tangible shift here is just moving away from sort of this, you know, meat only focused, and really we want to be known for, yes, we have that, but also like the finesse and the approach we use with the fish dishes we do, and then just these really amazing vegetables that we kind of just create dishes where they're the star, you know, and that kind of shifts away from, you know, it's more of a 3-dimensional, 4-dimensional experience instead of 1 dimension.
Specifically with wine, I see it as you're just kind of guiding people to the right place, because when you have a list that is 60 pages with 20 to 30 selections on each page, that adds up to quite a bit. And it's really not the job of the guest to page through all of that and
Right.
do a study. That's why we're here, to figure out what the intent is for you in purchasing said bottle of wine, because everyone has a different experience and opinion about wine and how they see it fitting into their meal.
All right, everybody, this is the moment we've been waiting for. We're here at Press. We were speaking earlier to Chef and to Vinny, the sommelier, and we're going to get a great treat here. Oscar's with us, and we're about to be served some amazing samples of what we can expect to hear. And here comes the food now. So, yeah, this is going to be delicious.
Wow, look at this.
Again, we're here at Press in Napa Valley, right by St. Helena. Thank you, guys. Appreciate that. Well, Oscar, this looks pretty amazing.
Not
this
bad,
isn't your
right?
standard fare.
It is. It's my daily supper. No, I think it's great to sit down here with you now and have it all come together. See the food at the restaurant, and at the same time start enjoying some of the Crossroads wines here. So
Absolutely.
I see some oysters. So let me pour you a little bit of the Sauvignon Blanc to start.
Such a nice pale color. You know, I was in the cellar this morning and in the cave with Natalie, and we were talking about the process of not only are these where they're grown, which is Mount Veeder, which gives it that nice crisp
Right.
acidity, but just the way that you process it in the amphora, the eggs, a little tiny touch of oak, and then blend those all together. Cheers.
special.
Thanks
Cheers.
for having me in Napa. This
Absolutely.
is a
Welcome
beautiful
to
time to be
Napa.
here.
We're happy to be in business, and slowly as the region's starting to open up again. The weather's been exceptionally nice this springtime, so
Right.
the mustard flowers are out. There's beautiful young green growth in the vineyards everywhere, so it's a great time to come.
Absolutely. And so now that things are opening up, we're trying to bring Napa to you guys right now. So I hope you're enjoying this. And I know your mouth is watering right now with all of this food. But you'll be out here one of these days, and be sure to stop by. It's the whole Rudd experience and the Crossroads experience and the Press experience all into one. So let's talk about pairing. What have we got here? We've got some oysters. And
Some
what have we got
beautiful
here?
oysters. We got some Dungeness crab from the Pacific coast here with glass noodles. Some marinated pig's ears, which is kind of unusual, but it's a nice little snack, I would say, before dinner. And then we've got the eye of the ribeye here with some Brussels sprouts and some spring greens as well.
Wow, that looks
so
beautiful.
I think together with the Sauvignon Blanc and then afterwards the Cabernet Sauvignon with the ribeye, we've got a perfect night ahead of us.
I guess so. Now, we were talking earlier with the chef about seasonality and regionality, and that goes with the food. Kind of goes with the whole vibe here. So when you come here, you're kind of in an immersed experience in a way, the Napa Valley experience, I suppose we could call it.
I think that's what the Napa Valley does best, and what it's known for is lots of vintners together in one valley, lots of farmers together, and showcasing what this area is all about. Great, seasonal food and local wines.
All right, Oscar, let's stop talking about this stuff and dig in. I'm ready to pair something. So we're starting off with the Sauvignon Blanc. Always start with your whites, just like we're doing with you guys at home. So the oysters, I'm going to try an oyster, and walk me through what you think.
I mean, this is the classic pairing, right?
Right.
For anywhere in the world where you are seafood, anything from the ocean with a classic Sauvignon Blanc, I think is a match made in heaven. You get that siltiness of the ocean here. We grow the Sauvignon Blanc in a place where it's actually quite unusual for Napa Valley, up in the mountains. So you get a little bit of the ocean influence that comes from the Sonoma coast. You get some of that salinity in the
So you can
wine.
sense the sea.
Exactly. So
yeah.
we're bringing the seafood now to the mountain, if you will.
So now we're going to dig into a little bit of the. You said this is Dungeness
crab, and you've got glass noodles as well. A little bit of mushroom in there as well, and some bok choy. So a little bit of Asian influence in this dish. And Sauvignon Blanc as well goes well with with Asian food in general. You get the texture of you get the seafood aspect again, which goes well with the citrus aspect in the wine. We've got the texture of the glass noodles, which is beautiful for some of that summer stone fruit that comes out in the wine as well, and the mid palate.
So this is the thing about tasting wine, and this is where it can get geeky at times, because we're talking about pairing and how it elevates sort of the food experience, and it does, but now we're almost into how it elevates, and it's not just flavors, it's textures and mouthfeels and things like that.
It needs to me, combining food and wine, they go well together obviously, but it needs to be complementary. It needs to dance on your palate together, right? And not
again,
contradict too much.
And that word balance comes in again, because that's what it's all about. Just something that's just exciting about this, but as you say, it's just that right balance of seafood, some really nice fresh greens. Now we've saved some of the meat that is the best. Now, what is this again? This is the eye of the
ribeye. So the middle part of the ribeye here. And it's got a little bit of late winter, early spring elements in here as well. Some beautiful sea salt on top. So bringing out some of the notes in the Cabernet Sauvignon, which is obviously
this is the
much more
classic,
juiciness. Right? Some big spices, some, I don't know, a warm dark fruit.
Yeah, the dark fruit. It's
Summer
almost like
pie.
that blackberry sounds such a common thing, but boy, you put your nose in there and there's the blackberry.
And you've got the fattiness of the ribeye that you need to work with the tannins in the wine. If you have those together in the same bite, that's when it all melts together.
This does have really nice soft tannin. And this, I can see why you don't have spicy with this. I mean, it does kind of light it up just a little bit, but with the ribeye, that's a terrific combo. Well, listen, this is just a sampling of the fare that's offered here at Press. They've got an amazing team. This is a beautiful setting. Again, we encourage you guys to come out here as soon as you can. And in the meantime, just keep watching this video, rewatching it whenever you have your Jones in for Napa. Grab yourself a nice bottle of wine and come and join us again. And welcome back. Here we are in the library room, and we have got Vincent Morrow. He is the master sommelier over at Press. And we're going to be talking a little bit more about some of the specialized part of wine, whether it's pairing, some of the nuances that we can expect, and also about cellaring and storing. Now, this is another live Vintec experience that we're doing right now, so I wanted to remind everybody that we are live. Look forward to your comments online. Let us know how we're doing, and if you have any questions on the product itself, just shoot those in and they'll be handled by the tech department. Otherwise, feel free to give us a couple of questions as we go along down the road. And before we get started, Vince, I wanted to remind everybody the Eno app, which you just saw a spot on, is a cellar management tool that we're going to dig into further with Vince. But so I'd like to, with no further ado, welcome you back. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks again for having me back. I'm glad I didn't get fired after last week. So.
Yeah. So we've been talking with Oscar a little bit about the Sauv Blanc. We visited with Natalie, the winemaker, a little bit about the Cabernet Sauvignon. Mm-hmm. And we'd like your expertise on maybe helping us get our head around some other nuances or other notes that we could do. Let's start off by pouring. Let's just go ahead and pour.
Yeah.
And we'll get going. But as I was mentioning to them, the Sauvignon Blanc is a great starter wine. And when I say starter wine, I mean if you're getting ready to have a dinner and you want to have a first course, this goes really great with appetizers. It's also great for a main course as well, but just right now, just keeping it simple, talk about appetizers and stuff. And then, yeah, we'll move on from there. But what are some of the aromas? We were talking about aromas, integrating that in your mind with your taste buds. What are some of the unique aromas that we're getting out of this one?
Yeah, I think on a bird's eye view, I think of Sauvignon Blanc being kind of more citrus and tropical driven, but particularly here, given that it's from Mount Veeder, little kind of colder part of Napa, higher elevation, I think about more exotic, like green tropical fruits of kiwi, starfruit, get lots of citrus, like yellow and red grapefruit, things like that.
A lot of great citrus. And I was noticing too, Vincent, that as it warms up a little bit, and this is the fun part about wine, there's a serving temperature that is recommended. And then as you go through that, as it warms up, as you hold on to it, it starts to have these subtle changes. But speaking of serving temperatures, what would you recommend, say, a Sauvignon Blanc be stored at, prepared for to serve?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think service-wise, we're thinking around 45 to 50 degrees Fahrenheit. Of course, if you want to store it to age, which we don't always talk about with Sauvignon Blanc, we're thinking more like in that 55 to 59 degree range. But I think serving it at a target, 45 degrees or so, and then you can always let it warm up from there. Much easier to let things warm up than it is to try and chill them down really fast.
Right, but certainly not as cold as it would be coming out of your refrigerator.
Right, yeah, I think taking it out of the fridge for a few minutes before you actually serve it gives the bottle a chance to warm up, and then honestly just getting it into the glass as soon as possible is going to warm it up. Just that friction and that contact with a warmer glass going from a colder bottle is going to help it open up quite a bit.
Right, and as you go through the glass, you'll notice if you take your time that you're going to notice different levels. When it's really cold, it's going to have that super citrusy, acidy sort of feeling. Now I'm getting it to mellow out a little bit. I'm almost getting some pineapple notes in there, some buttery pineapple.
I feel like you're right here with
Oh,
me.
really?
Yeah.
Ah, cheers.
A lot more of that yellow tropical, and again, we're not. Anytime we chill something down to near freezing, you really mute everything that's in the wine, these aromatic compounds, but as it warms up, they start to activate. And you certainly don't want them to get too warm because then they actually blow off and they don't exist anymore.
Right.
So that's
right.
when you hear
it's
about.
It's funny that the whites have their zone they want to be in, and otherwise they start tasting a little bit too acidic and stuff. And likewise with the cabs or the darker reds, or any of the reds for that matter, they want to be served a little warmer. But room temperature is a myth, right? Because room temperature, when that phrase came out, I think they were in castles with 15-foot walls, and it was 60 degrees in there all the time.
Room temp, you still needed a fur coat and a robe
and
to
a
be
fireplace.
comfortable. Exactly.
Exactly.
So I think it's amazing how the meaning of words changes over time. So when you hear people say that, I think nowadays we're referencing to, I don't know, mid to high 60s is a good temperature, but if we were to serve the Cabernet, I like to see it at like 62 or 63 degrees. So it has a slight chill, a slight like cellar chill to it. And then as it warms up a bit, it'll become even more expressive.
And let's go ahead and pour that cab, because that is another great one to linger on. Now, what would you, just for snacks and goodies, charcuterie platter is always sort of the classic go-to, right?
Yeah, I think especially for temperature purposes, and as we go into spring and summer, charcuterie is a great option for Cabernet. That way you kind of don't feel the pressure necessarily to serve something warm to kind of balance out those tannins, but you can still get some kind of fatty cuts of charcuterie that end up being nice for something for the tannins to integrate with.
And that's another thing too, to just help folks out that aren't real experienced with that. Why fatty foods with, say, a cab or a big red?
Yeah, it's really a function of texture. So tannins equals bitterness in wine, and bitter can be offset by things like sweetness, or it can be offset by fats or proteins. So when you think about these big, rich fatty steaks that we eat with Cabernet, there is
a reason for
some science behind that, so to speak.
So the tannin is sort of a texture rather than a flavor, I think. And it's almost like if you've ever bitten into a walnut shell or part of, or had some tea, like black tea that was maybe a little on the colder side, it kind of makes your teeth gritty or something.
Or was
like that.
over steeped. That's that's a good, or like bitter coffee, things like that are good analogies.
So again, back to sort of cellaring and storing. Perfect temperature is, you said 60.
Yeah, I think
two-ish?
Service temperature is in the low 60s, just so that you have a slight chill on it. But I think it depends on how long you're cellaring. Ideally, you're at 55 or 56.
Just like the cave.
Yeah, exactly. Whereas I do put more emphasis on the consistency of temperature over time. If you have big temperature swings on whatever your storage is, that can actually hurt the wine because you're expanding and contracting the cork. And when that happens, air starts to get in, and then you're ruining your wine kind of from the inside out. So
well, so stability is the key. Light is another one. I mean, I see people that have these beautiful racks out in their kitchen, in their living room, and the sun is shining
and
right
then the
on
big bay window right next to it.
What does sunlight do to wine?
So sunlight starts to prematurely age and oxidize wine. So that's why you will typically see on wines a darker colored bottle. Even in Europe, you might see blue or green or brown. Whereas especially here on the Sauvignon Blanc, having a clear bottle, we really want to be careful that that doesn't see any light exposure.
And as part of the tradition, I suppose, of having a Sauvignon Blanc in a clear glass so that you can sort of discern, because it typically doesn't age, but when a white wine starts to go over and get aged, it starts to amber a little bit, so you can sort of discern from the color of it. Maybe.
I mean, especially in America, we're so drawn. We like to eat and drink with our eyes. So before we've even had a taste of either of these, we're already judging these things. So especially with rosé and white wine, like color sometimes takes more precedent than necessarily the flavor in it. And it's a competitive market like anything else, especially when you've got 20, 30 other SKUs on the grocery store shelf for that section. That can be a big indicator.
So as far as storing wine, now I know when we were over visiting you at Press, and you guys saw in that last clip, pretty stunning, massive wine cellar. At least 10,000 bottles in there. And what is the headline there, Vincent? It's really that this is the largest and broadest range of Napa reds in the world.
Napa wine in general.
Napa wine in general.
Obviously, most of our list is red and predominantly Cabernet, or Cabernet focused, but it is one of the largest. It's like a library or museum, if you will, for Napa wine. It
does sound like a museum, and I met a bunch of people that have been to what was Dean and DeLuca, which is right next door, which, by the way, that was a Leslie Rudd property, if you will, a venture of his. But I would talk to these people the other day about going in there and buying cheese and charcuterie, and there's a glass window that you could look into the cave from the store. And it's pretty stunning. We don't have a lot of time left, Vincent, but one of the things I would like to cover with you is two things. One is, in that cellar, is humidity an important component?
Yes, absolutely.
And how do you manage that? Is it just you have a humidifier in there clearly? And
we don't. We have pretty even keeled humidity in the restaurant, so we're good. But having worked in other locations like in San Francisco, we needed a dehumidifier, especially when things were subterranean, because there's so much water in the air, and we actually had to take it out. Otherwise, you can really ruin labels. You can have mold and growth issues, bacteria, things like that. So
not a good thing.
Not very fun.
And just wrapping it up, I know that there's a lot of folks that are looking at this beautiful cabinet and saying, God, how many bottles could we store in there? And it'll hold 200 bottles for sure.
That's great.
That's not as many as you've got to manage, but you've gotten a chance to look at the Eno app, and you get the concept of digital cellar management tools. And what would you say is a convenience level that it would help out the average owner to sort of manage their cellar?
Well, we might have referenced this last week, but I think the times when we want something specific or we have those aha moments, maybe when we have guests over or we're celebrating, it's usually in the middle of dinner after you've already had a little bit of wine or maybe a cocktail or two, and you're digging around trying to find that special bottle. And having an application like this, or in our case, in the heat of service on a Friday night,
Right.
we know exactly where to go. It's cutting out seconds, sometimes minutes of searching for these wines that could otherwise be provided as a service tableside for guests. So.
Well, there you go. So we've covered a lot of important points here, and I want to thank all you guys for joining us tonight. I hope it was as enjoyable for all of you as it was for us here. We love doing this, and we love bringing you these experiences with Vintec. This is what we're kind of known for, and we're going to continue to do this throughout basically the California wine region. We haven't talked international yet. We'll get there, Ben and Nolan. But anyway, right now we got our hands full with California. Vincent, I'd like to thank you again. Cheers.
Cheers.
Appreciate
My
you
pleasure.
coming. It's been a great time. Anyway, you guys have more questions, drop us a line. The comments are going to be open for a while. Until next time, cheers.
Cheers.